Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. Let's talk boxing. A couple of topics to cover today. First and foremost, I want to talk about Anthony Joshua and his selection of Robert Helenius to step in for DILLIAN Whyte, who has had that adverse finding in his PED test. We'll talk about whether that's the right choice or not for AJ in preparation for Deontay Wilder. I also want to talk about Richard Riakporhe. He has pulled out of the purse bids that were due today for him to fight for the IBF title against JAI OPETAIA. Is that a duck? Is it boxer dictating what he should do? And if so, is that good for his career or not? We'll get into that too. We'll start off discussing Anthony Joshua. You know, I've had a number of messages from different people. I think I've had 4 now of people that have sort of been pointing me to Hatman's videos over the last couple of weeks where we disagree on a few things. And this is one of them because I've been saying I don't like Gerald Washington as an opponent if you're talking about preparation for Deontay Wilder. Guys, I know a couple of you have tried to sort of evolve drama into this. Dudes, listen, I've been chatting to Hatman now for, 2-3 years, and I love talking to the guy. I like him a lot. I've got so much respect for him. Every time I debate Hatman, I will feel enriched coming away from it because I realise that I'm talking to somebody who's capable of critical thinking. But as two men that are capable of critical thinking, who are strong characters, we don't have to fold to the opinion of the other person. That's the whole point of not living inside this echo chamber. It's the whole point of having the ability to critically think and engage. There's no drama. I'm not going to fall out of a guy I really like and whose values I really like over the sport of boxing. We just see things differently on a couple of situations, and I'll explain my position on this one with regards to Gerald Washington. But yeah, for you guys that are looking for drama, there's certainly nothing negative between me and Hatman, and there certainly never would be over the sport of boxing. With regards to Gerald Washington as a potential opponent, the reason I didn't like it is because for me, he's been stopped in 5 of his last 7, and he's never shown a willingness to bite down on that gum shield. And he's a good technical boxer. And you saw against Deontay Wilder, for instance, he caused him some issues early on with the technical boxing. And the minute he hit a crisis, he folded. And this has happened far too many times in the course of his career. I don't believe he can hang with Anthony Joshua from the perspective of technical boxing. So from the very first round, you're going to see him hit a crisis or see him on the back foot. If he ends up folding within a round or 2, what does AJ really gain from that? Now, from Hatman's perspective, and those that agree with Hatman, and I understand this logic, the idea is he would have knocked someone's spark out. It hasn't happened for a long time. That's going to give him a big confidence boost moving into a fight with Deontay Wilder. Whilst I agree to an extent when it comes to that, when you're facing a giant of the heavyweight division in Wilder who can clean your clock inside a split second, beating a guy who you know is not on that level, how much confidence that really going to give you? It's not going to prepare you for any sort of rough and tumble in there. You know, Hatman has used the analogy of swimming, and so have I. Just by coincidence, when we've discussed Anthony Joshua and his sort of comeback, him being on the comeback trail, Hatman explains it as, look, if you're going to throw AJ in the sea and he almost drowns, when you then want to prepare him for going back into the open water, the last thing you want to do is throw him in the deep end of a swimming pool because he's going to panic. You want to put him in the shallow end, you know, get him where his feet can still touch the floor sort of thing, and then you gradually build up. If there was an unlimited amount of time in order to bring him back, like the Lennox Lewis situation that Hatman alludes to, then I would agree with Hatman. I'd have no problem with Gerald Washington. Go blow him out. Go and blow someone else out after that too. Go do it to 2-3 opponents. And then after that, you can start to look to raise your level. I'm not in disagreement with that logic. However, there is a very serious threat on the horizon, which is Deontay Wilder, as the next fight. So you don't have the luxury of saying, I'm going to take this 3 or 4 times. So the way I see it, to continue with the swimming analogy, is that if Anthony Joshua, who was a very accomplished Olympic swimmer for argument's sake, gold medalist, you throw him in the open water, big waves, and he almost drowns against Alexander Usyk. For me, you can't then go and put him in a paddling pool. His feet are touching the floor. You're getting him used to being in water. And then from there, you jump to throwing him to the open waves, the open waters with big waves, sharks swimming around. He will drown regardless. So you're forced to, in a way, move him from a shallow pool in Jermaine Franklin, good fighter, but was never really going to beat Anthony Joshua in my humble opinion. And from there, you start to move him to the deep end of the pool quite quickly, where you've got a wave machine. And you try to emulate something that could come as a crisis when he's going to then later on be forced to be thrown into those open waters. In February, he's going to be on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Someone's going to grab him from the scruff of the neck and throw him overboard. The preparation of being in a paddling pool up until that point is not going to prepare him for that. If you've got him in the deep end of a swimming pool with some wave machines where you know that there's you're emulating a threat, but really you know he should come through it. When those big waves start crashing down on his head and he starts to see the sharks circling, he's in a better position mentally. Now, when you're talking about Robert Helenius, the reason I like that as a fight is because he too, like Washington, is not necessarily the most courageous of heavyweights. And listen, we're always talking in terms of comparative to other heavyweights. I'm not talking about compared to the average Joe in the street, right? But when Hellenius has also hit a crisis, he too has tended to fold. The difference with Hellenius is that he carries a massive right hand and he can bide his time with it. Sometimes you'll see him moving backwards and he's putting his hands out and he looks like he doesn't want to engage, and all of a sudden he tries to come into life with that right hand. So he can emulate a particular threat that could be coming from Wilder, in the sense that Wilder's got a massive right hand as well that can change the world in a split second, just like Hellenius. And Wilder can also be passive and inactive. We saw him getting outboxed by Gerald Washington, by Artur Szpilka, by Luis Ortiz, by Tyson Fury, and then all of a sudden, bang, he bursts into life. So even when there's nothing coming your way, you still have to remain focused on concentrating on the danger of the right hand that's coming your way. And that is what Hellenius could in some ways emulate, in the sense that it's dangerous for you to just run in on him. You've got to be aware of what's coming and you can't get too comfortable. If there's a lull in the action, Hellenius could just land a big right hand out of nowhere. So from the perspective of emulating, it offers something that's similar. And that is where the mental preparation for Deontay Wilder comes about. But it's not a guy that you expect AJ to lose to. If he does get clipped and taken out, then he should not be in a ring with Deontay Wilder. It's as simple as that. Whereas Andy Ruiz, I know a lot of you are saying, but listen, they've taken a tough opponent on short notice in the past. As I've said before, I had a bet on Andy Ruiz to beat AJ in the first fight. When I saw that AJ was so bulked up, so heavy, I knew he didn't have the hand speed of Ruiz. I knew he was going to fight a fight that was all wrong for him. In the rematch, when I was seeing he was coming lighter and I knew he'd been working on movement, I actually had a bet on AJ to beat Ruiz. That's where styles make fights. But the point is, I knew that Ruiz was a significant threat. He's a top heavyweight. Robert Helenius, particularly at this age, is not a top heavyweight. There's always going to be some sort of a threat at heavyweight because they're big men that hit very hard. But if you're slipping up to the likes of Robert Helenius, then you don't really have much chance against Deontay Wilder. What you're ultimately saying, therefore, is let's not take the risk because we don't want to risk the bag. But then if you're not preparing the best way that you can in order to beat Deontay Wilder, all you're really doing is setting up to cash out. Now, what they do need to do is get in his head and say to him, listen, forget the fact that Deontay took him out in a round. Don't try and emulate that. This is not a competition as to who takes him out earlier. You've got a job to do. You've got a big fight coming up in Saudi. You're fully aware that he offers a threat with that right hand. You have to work your way in intelligently rather than say against a Washington who's not a puncher. He's a boxer. You're going to be superior from a technical boxing perspective. You're going to be the animal between you two. You can walk him down, jump on him and take him out early. The threat, the potential threat, is different with Hellenius. And that's why I personally feel that this is a much better fight. So of the available opponents that are realistic, this is the one that I think that they've chosen, and it's the correct decision. We'll see how it plays out. Now let's move on to the cruiserweight division. Richard Riakporhe pulled out of Pursebiz today to face JAI OPETAIA for an IBF world title. He put out a statement to say, I have worked extremely hard the past 2 years to get myself to the top of the cruiserweight division. We had accepted an offer to fight for the IBF title on 2 occasions in 2 different locations. For reasons unclear to me and to my promoter, these offers were then withdrawn. During these negotiations, I've missed out on other opportunities, which has left me inactive. It is clear other parties were simply trying to disrupt my journey, which I won't let happen. I have sacrificed a lot to be in a mandatory position with 2 governing bodies and have worked towards world titles in my whole career. I would like to thank the IBF for their support, and I look forward to fighting for their prestigious title one day. However, I have chosen to go a different route and will be sharing news of another world title opportunity very soon. I will become a world champion and I will unify the division. Now, a lot of people have looked at this and said this is Ben Shalom's doing again. This is the whole Fraser Clark, Fabio Wardley situation. They're trying to essentially keep Riakporhe and all the other talent on their own platform. They don't want to enable the zone to earn anything by generating a fight between the talents of the 2 platforms, the 2 networks, and then essentially give them a boost in profit. So freeze him out, leave him over there, start to demand he crosses the street. A couple of you have made references to the PBC and saying that's the sort of tactic Sky are trying to go down. Here's the thing. If the aim is to really hurt the zone long term, not just in the short term where you could have Riakporhe fighting the winner of CBS and Okoli, and you've got some domestic fights there that are going to generate, I mean, they're world titles, it's a world title fight, so it's a world global fight, but I mean, in terms of the interest it's going to generate, it will be predominantly in the UK. You're going to get some sort of revenue for that. In the short term, sure, you're making the most money in the cruiserweight division. But if you really want to dominate the division, if you want to monopolize it, if you want to bring all the belts over to your platform and then start taking control, well, then the play is for Richard Riakporhe to go and beat JAI OPETAIA, take his belt, bring it back over, and then he faces the winner of Okoli and CBS 2 for a unification fight. And then once you've got a unified champion, you're the one calling all the shots. Anybody else, Marion, anyone else that wants a shot, they're going to have to come over to your platform. Not necessarily sign with you. I mean, you can go down that route, but none of us fans want to see that. But they would have to cross the street in terms of the platform they perform on. And that's the play to make. However, JAI OPETAIA is a brilliant boxer puncher. He can get touched a little bit. And if Riakporhe was to touch him, we know he can take a guy out. But the fact is, OPETAIA is more proven. He's the one that toppled Maris Briedis. And when I was doing the preview to that fight, I did a technical breakdown, I picked Briedis, but I was saying, listen, OPETAIA, who I've not seen that much of, I did know him from, you know, his amateur days. I'd seen him a couple of times back then, but in terms of his pro career, I'd only seen clips of footage on him on YouTube. There wasn't much available. But from that alone, I could tell he was a really good boxer puncher, perhaps could be touched, and he was a real threat to Maris Briedis. An aging Maris Briedis. You can see the talent there. You can see that he's a better technical boxer than Riakporhe. And the last thing that Sky want is for Riakporhe to go and get schooled or beaten up by JAI OPETAIA. That would be disastrous for them, because then selling a fight against the winner of CBS Okoli 2, well, then that becomes a harder proposition for them. So to me, they're not taking a gamble on him. To me, it suggests that there's a lack of true belief here when it comes to Richard Riakporhe. Whichever way you cut it, the position of Richard Riakporhe does not make sense. You see, if you're talking about them messing you around, and that's why you're going down another route, that applies if you're a voluntary challenger and people are calling for the fight and they're messing you around. Maybe even mandatory if they want to delay you until you get to the point of the purse bids. Once those purse bids are called, the champion has one choice or two choices. He's either got to put up and fight you for the title, or he needs to shut up and drop the belt and move on. You can't have it both ways. If you cannot agree financially, you cannot agree terms, the splits are determined by the governing body. So the IBF would have said, listen, you need to fight him at this particular split, JAI OPETAIA, otherwise we're taking your belt. So you've cornered him. If he's trying to avoid you and run and he's not serious about taking a fight, you've cornered him. There's nowhere left to go. So then you pull out on the day of the purse splits. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. So something else has occurred here. It's either Richard Riakporhe's team don't want this fight. They think that OPETAIA is all wrong for them and they feel it would be easier to go another route, which is fine if that's the route they want to go down tactically. It is a duck though. Or it's Ben Shalom trying to play the short game rather than the long game because they don't really believe in Richard Riakporhe's ability to dethrone JAI OPETAIA. Either way, if you're OPETAIA, you're going to be looking at this and saying, this guy was my mandatory. He's been calling for an opportunity at me. He got the opportunity at me and he ducked me. These dudes are afraid of me. They don't want it. And I'm just telling you how it will be seen by Team OPETAIA. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Let me know also what you think about Anthony Joshua and his choice of Robert Helenius. Of the available fights, it's the one I like in preparation for Deontay. I know Hatman and a few others see it differently. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Take care. God bless.